Believe it or not, everyone, there is going to be a 2022 college football season. And USC and UCLA, they're actually going to play against everybody in the Pac-12. And yes, Texas and Oklahoma for now, they're still in the Big 12, and they're going to compete for a conference championship in the Big 12. And we're going to play some football in about 8 weeks. Just about 8 weeks. So we're going to talk expansion with you. We're going to talk realignment. I'm going to lay out basically where I think the situations stand right now. I started to produce a video this afternoon looking at the ACC candidates for the Big Ten or the SEC and started to measure those up. I wasn't able to get it done in time for release this afternoon. We'll release it sometime either later tonight or in the morning. But we'll talk some football. This was going to be my week. This was going to be the week to really start to look at personnel, look at the teams, start to project, review the units, and talk about football on the field in 2022. And then USC and UCLA pulled that stunt, joining the Big Ten, and it hasn't stopped since. But you guys are responding, obviously, with a lot of talk and a lot of questions and a lot of discussion and debate and projections about what could happen. And it just keeps rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. And we don't know when the next shoe is going to drop. But it seems to hinge on Notre Dame to a certain extent, at least on the Big Ten side of things. Of course, the SEC could step out and do something, or the Big 12 could try to stabilize their situation and go after some programs that we have suggested, and they're obviously talking to and reviewing right now. And, of course, the Pac-12 is trying to survive. They're not going to be able to add any programs that are Power 5 worthy. But the Pac-12 does have an avenue, a path, a narrow path to try to maintain what they have and continue on. Because remember, with all the other sports, the Pac-12 is top-notch. With all the other sports, they're so strong, and they could be a American Conference level, current Mountain West level football conference that may have a chance of getting its champion, a chance, like an American Conference kind of chance, 1 out of 8 chance to get into the playoff. Or with an expanded 12-team playoff, maybe the Pac-12 champion doesn't have a guaranteed spot like the Power 3 or 4, but they get seriously considered with all those entries available, 12. But that's 4 to 5 years away, most likely, unless contracts get torn up. We're looking until all the way to 2026 before a college football playoff is going to be what most of us would like it to be. All right. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Keep in mind that when you shop Amazon, please use the link in the description section down in all the videos. It's down in the description section underneath the window of the video. And there's an Amazon link. We got Amazon written in caps. And instead of spending, let's say, $100 at Amazon, you're going to send them only like 97, and I get 3. Something like that, maybe 1 or 2. So we would appreciate that. Also, please like before you get settled. Please like the video, even if you don't agree with me. That's my philosophy, at least. Even if you don't agree with me, if you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, please like the video and let people know that we're here talking college football with you. We've got a show a little bit later tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern time with the Wholesome One. On the Miami channel. That's 8 o'clock Eastern time. A big Friday lined up with, of course, West Virginia Live at 8. And then we've got the call-in show, another one of these coming up at 9 o'clock Eastern time. So let me get the link out to everyone. And if you've missed us for the last few weeks, we no longer have the dedicated phone line because of a number of advantages and benefits to doing it this way. In the meantime, I will leave the link, and we will also run down some scenarios here that are pretty apparent to all of us, but not all of you are keeping an eye on this 24/7, 365 like I try to. There's a business end to this, so I can't be watching as much football and reading as much football as I would like. I sat down just took like 3 minutes last night just to want to read up on NC State. So I just read up on NC State for about 10 or 15 minutes. And so I'm going to need to be doing that more and more as we prepare for the season, because we want to deliver, and our mission is to deliver the best in college football analysis. And I have left the StreamYard link right down there in the comments section in the live chat. All right. So the Big Ten's up right now. The Big Ten wants Notre Dame. Notre Dame is negotiating with the Big Ten. We recorded a segment today with Justin Rowe from Blue by 90. You're going to see those segments on the Michigan channel. And I thought, I think it's pretty apparent here that if Oregon and Washington clearly want to be in the Big Ten, that the Big Ten would either review them and say, thanks, but no thanks. You have not met our standard for application. Or the Big Ten would accept Washington and Oregon. Why risk losing them if you're reviewing their qualifications and you want to take them in, possibly? Why risk losing them by saying, you know what, hang on? The only answer to that question that I can come up with is that Notre Dame has leverage here. Of course, the Big Ten is pursuing Notre Dame. And Notre Dame, for right now, based on the current structure of college football, is just fine. They are fine. They've got a TV contract. People watch the games. Plenty of revenue. Even though the revenue is going to be better in the Big Ten, still plenty of revenue. And they maintain the national face that they would like to continue to have, to be unique, to be the only independent in college football, the only one that matters. So I got to think that in the Big Ten's discussions with Notre Dame, there are some caveats there that maybe Notre Dame is looking for a higher portion of the rights fees, that they are looking to have the say of who else joins the league with them. Otherwise, why would the Big Ten not just give Washington and Oregon an answer and then deal with Notre Dame and say, Notre Dame, we've got an even better league right now with Washington and Oregon? From what I understand, the revenue split with Washington and Oregon pretty much comes out the same. So the Big Ten is basically continuing to tear apart the Pac-12, is keeping two substantial programs away from the Big 12 and the SEC, and is further extending itself to the West Coast and maybe providing playing partners, let's say, with USC and UCLA by grabbing Washington and Oregon. As I understand it, it wouldn't be a financial play that they would be able to increase the TV revenue enough to supersede and give even more money. Like Oklahoma and Texas, in joining the SEC, raised the SEC's value so much that even by distributing to two more teams, the SEC still going to be able to make another $20-some million revenue per team. Think of that. That's 14 teams, now 16. They're making another $300 million plus, $350 per year to be able to distribute another $25 million with two more teams. So based on what I understand, that the Big Ten is in a position where Washington and Oregon become a wash. They basically replace the money that has to be distributed to them, which at that point is going to be in the 100 million range per team. All right. I've left the link there in the chat. I am going to let everyone know that there is potential that I have to get off here at about 6:45 Eastern, possibly. We shall see. But appreciate everybody being here. And I just, you know what I just did? Out of habit, I spun all the way to the top of the chat. But you guys don't like me doing that. To go all the way to the top of the chat, Ed Rogers says, no, don't do it, Mark. So we're starting at the bottom. We are starting where we are. Peanut 3844, ACC teams are going nowhere. Okay. So we outlined the Big Ten. That's what the Big Ten's looking at. And I got to think that if Washington and Oregon are just on the bubble, that it does the Big Ten no good to grab Utah, Colorado, anybody else. Maybe go east toward the ACC. So let's line that portion of it up. Let's look at the ACC. That was me taking a stab at, that was a word somewhere between part and portion. Partian. So if you go out to the ACC, who are the most reputable and who are the most lucrative, valuable programs there in the ACC? From a football standpoint, it's Clemson right now, of course. If you put everything into consideration, I've got to say it's Miami. Location, recruiting location, academics standing, football potential, football history. We know that the program's decent right now. It's good. We'll see how good this fall, but it's good. And then beyond that, geographically, it's easy. And we still, all of us, I think, most of us have to check ourselves when it comes to trying to project these teams into conferences because, hey, I have to remind myself maybe the geography doesn't matter. I've got to remind myself of that to a certain extent. Although when you really think about it, this move by the Big Ten is the first, for as much as it doesn't seem like geography matters anymore at all, this is the first move where a conference added, check me on that. The Big 12, of course, was with West Virginia. West Virginia is not connected to any other Big 12 states. So I stand corrected there. I caught myself. West Virginia joining the Big 12. That was the first decision made by a conference where there are no contiguous states involved in this expansion. And then, of course, with the SEC in Missouri and Texas A&M, okay, they're connected. Utah, Colorado to the Pac-12, they're connected. And now last summer, Texas, Oklahoma connected to the SEC in terms of geography. So for as much as we knock the SEC for taking Texas and Oklahoma and saying it doesn't make sense geographically, it does to a certain extent. But then the Big 12, of course, just based on survival, was the first with the West Virginia move. And now with the fourth that they added this past summer and will add in 2023 on the field, where they went all over the map. The Big 12 is now the American Conference or Conference USA. So this move by the Big Ten was the first one that was made where the conference was acting out of a position of strength, where they went that far to grab two schools. The Big 12 was acting out of survival mode. The SEC and the Big Ten are acting out of territorial, flexing our muscles mode. That's what they're doing. We appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Falcon Rex, thank you so much for the super sticker. Appreciate that, sir. Always appreciated. Thank you so much for that. So back to the ACC. Miami's attractive. Clemson attractive in a different way. Smaller TV markets involved. Better football program right now. But again, smaller TV markets, the recruiting not quite as good. Don't have the NIL TV markets recruiting footprint that Miami does. Florida State, technically the smallest television market in Tallahassee out of those contenders in the ACC, although Clemson, they don't really have a TV market at all. They're 2 hours away from Atlanta, 2 hours away from Charlotte. Georgia Tech's an interesting one out of Atlanta. Bad football program right now. Nobody cares. Nobody goes to the games. If you're in Atlanta, you're a Falcons fan, and you're a Georgia football fan, you don't care about Georgia Tech. But it's not been that long. We tend to get focused on what's going on right now. Yes, Stanford is awful right now, but it's only been, they were in the Pac-12 championship game in 2017. They were going to the Rose Bowl and winning the Rose Bowl and finishing in the top 5 in the nation in 2015. That was only 6 seasons ago. Georgia Tech, the same thing. Won the Orange Bowl in 2014. You can win at Georgia Tech. You can win at Stanford. And to be in Atlanta, especially, I don't think it's so big a deal for the SEC. If the SEC grabs up Georgia Tech, it's just basically dismantling the ACC at that point. But the Big Ten to go to Georgia Tech, academically, it fits. And that's the Big Ten saying, wow, we've gone out to California, and now we can recruit so much better out of Southern California because of USC and UCLA. Let's do the same thing in the South. Let's go get North Carolina and Georgia Tech, for example. I don't think Virginia provides a lot of value for the Big Ten, except academically it does. But from a football standpoint, it does not. A lot of people are putting together North Carolina and Virginia. I would favor, if I was the Big Ten, Georgia Tech over Virginia because of recruiting, because they have won. Virginia is basically, no offense to any Cavalier fans out there, I don't know where you are. I used to work with a Virginia fan who was the biggest college sports fan I've ever known for his particular teams. Like, he just wasn't a Virginia football and men's basketball fan. He rooted for lacrosse. He rooted for the baseball team. He rooted for the women's basketball team. He rooted for whomever, soccer. He knew that Virginia won yesterday 3-2, and these 3 people scored the goals in the games. Everything Virginia. He couldn't utter a sentence without stating the name Virginia. But we have very few Virginia football fans. Now, when I've been taking my poll, and you can please write me at MarkRogersTV@gmail to let me know who you root for, because we're still keeping that tally. We have had a couple of Virginia fans step up. So you're out there. So I'm not going to try to offend you, but I may. You've never been really good at football. Never. That can't be said for too many teams across the country. Like, never. Like, South Carolina underachieves. Its history is abysmal. But Steve Spurrier went 11-2 3 consecutive years, top 5 finishes. Virginia's never done that. Never. Give me a 10-win Virginia season. I don't think they have. I don't think since I've been watching college football, Virginia's ever won 10 games. I can almost state that as a fact. Going back to the late 70s, Virginia, they were okay for a long time under George Welsh. Bronco Mendenhall had some nice seasons, and they went to the ACC championship game. They lost by 45 points. But 8-4 is pretty much the ceiling at Virginia. You got Clemson, you got Florida State. Florida State's been down, small TV market, but man, the brand is amazing, and you can still win at Florida State. If you are located in the state of Florida, you should be able to win. So that's the ACC narrative. And I really couldn't tell you. I could tell you from a football standpoint. I'd have to dig into the numbers to really look at TV ratings and the viewership there and the media markets to try to separate the likes of Virginia Tech and NC State. Look at how good the Wolfpack could be this year in football. And they seem to be getting better and better and better. We're coming up on North Carolina State is just that much better than Virginia all time. They're better. They've had better stretches. They are clearly better, but they're just kind of a higher grade. The ACC is full of these kind of programs. Louisville, Boston College. Now, there you start to go into a different dynamic because of the academics are extremely strong, but they're in the Northeast. Syracuse. What is going to happen to these schools? I hope that what was stated somewhere in the chat there, that the grant of rights is as strong and ironclad as some people are reporting it to be. And I will never pretend to know anything just to spout something off here. If I don't know something, I'll let you know. And I've gathered all sorts of stuff and opinions from people that I trust on the grant of rights, and have heard a zillion comments from all of you. I hear on one hand, it's ironclad. Nobody's getting out of this. It would just sacrifice a football program for decades, basically. It's just, or it just cannot be done. Versus, these are the ways that it can be escaped, the grant of rights. So I've seen both. So if the latter is true, then the ACC is the ACC. We knock the TV contract, and we knock, meaning me. I won't speak for all of you, but I see all the comments about the TV contract in the ACC, and it sucks. They didn't do themselves well, especially for having Notre Dame for 5 to 6 games out of their football delivery, their football menu every season for the past, 5 or 6 years now. But the one thing we will applaud the ACC for, even if it doesn't turn out to be completely ironclad, they have obviously made it extremely difficult, at the least, with this grant of rights, for anyone to leave the conference. So let's be fair and applaud the ACC for that. If you've noticed, the helmet display over here is featuring the ACC teams that we have that are under consideration for play in the SEC and the Big Ten. Now, the Big 12, my recommendation to the Big 12 is simply grab decent Power 5 programs, or even Group of 5 programs. So the Power 5s are the ones we've talked about ever since this blew up last Thursday. It's been 1 week. USC, UCLA changed everything, or at least set the stage for more tremors across the nation. Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah. Those are the 4 that people talk about with the Big 12. I would go after Washington, Oregon. I would show them that we want you. And we're going to have this massive conference. We can question whether there are going to be any elite teams in that conference, but it's going to be really thick and really good. Really solid. That starts with UCF and BYU, Houston, and Cincinnati joining. We could see just a stack of 7-5, 8-4 teams. And then it would be even more so in that direction with Arizona, Arizona State. They can get back to respectability. Arizona State's going to have to fight through the NCAA. I don't expect that to be a huge deal. It's going to hurt them for a couple of years. Scholarships, maybe a bowl ban. Utah, Colorado. Utah, great get for the Big 12 from a football standpoint. But I brought this up the other night, and I posted this in a video, I think, first, and I was glad and pleased to get the pat on the back and the backing from our guy, Tony Altimore, when I set up San Diego State and Fresno State for the Pac-12, and SMU. Put them together with Texas Tech and TCU. They're in the same market as TCU, Dallas market. And there are a lot of reasons why SMU makes some sense if you have to dig deep. Good stuff. All right, super chat coming in. Thank you so much, Falcon Rex. Appreciate that so much. Daniel says the insights from Tony Altimore match the ACC academics more with the Big Ten. Yes, but the sports and culture align better with the SEC. The sports, yes. The geography, of course. The culture, can't really speak to that. The culture with the SEC, when you say culture, that goes in a lot of different directions, because we've had these culture kind of conversations that were more from a political and social standpoint, meaning social, not let's have a drink together, but social, like social issues, social commentary versus, yes, culture. Like, how do you live? What do you like? What music do you listen to? Do you drive a pickup truck? Yeah, ACC and SEC. Thank you for that, Daniel. Falcon Rex, Tony's point, ACC schools should sit tight. Agree. Should sit tight. Depends who we're talking about in the ACC. I'm Clemson and the SEC calls. It's going to be mighty difficult to dig deep and hold on to my conference allegiance. I know that conference started in 1953, and a lot of the teams that we're talking about, at least the Carolinas and Clemsons, go all the way back to 1953. Of course, much newer in the last 20 years for the Miamis and Virginia Techs and Syracuse, Pitt, etc. But I would hate to do it from a loyalty standpoint, but the contract's in the low 30 million range, and the SEC is going to be in the 90-some million range. And just being a part of the SEC, now if you're NC State, you probably do have to sit tight. R.W. Tyndall says, Mark, that ship has sailed with Georgia Tech. Trust me. Okay. Is that because of the grant of rights? It's good to see Anthony here. Boomer's here. Pitt is a better program than Miami historically. Okay. All right. Pitt won a bunch of national championships in the 1920s, even before there was an AP poll. Miami has won 5 national championships since Pitt has won its last one in 1976. When you talk about historically, at some point, that history still counts. We still count it. When we look at the history books, we still count it as that's a national championship as awarded by the AP, or that's still a 7-1 record that season in 1922, and that's added to the wins and losses all time. So there's that historic record keeping, but how much of that history really impacts today? Miami won its first national championship. It's going to be 40 years next season. It's going to be 40 years. That's a long time. The history of college football is 150, and really it's the AP polls 85 years old. There were legitimate seasons starting in the 30s and 40s. And when I say legitimate, I mean like the conferences were all playing each other and the schedules were at least 9 games. Like you didn't have one team going 5-1. They played 6 games, and then you see somebody else played 11 games. So it came in stages, of course, and World War II kind of interrupted things. I think that was a pretty worthy cause, though. And then the sport was not integrated until the mid 60s into the early 70s. So when you say Pitt's historically a better program than Miami, I am just about going to guarantee you that Miami has an all-time winning percentage that is better than Pitt. I can just about guarantee that, because of course, if you guys want to reference it, we went through our all-time program rankings this past offseason. We went through national championships, conference championships, winning percentage, Heisman Trophy winners, and major award winners, and top 10 finishes, all that, AP poll points. And I don't remember Pitt being in the top 20. They were fringe top 25 in winning percentage. Miami's in the 15 range. I could look that up. Yes, web security, of course. JW, you can Wikipedia them and look at the whole deal. You guys do that. I'm sure I've done that many times. Oh, there we go. J-Dub is letting us know Miami's got 9 factors. Pitt wins 3. I got to say that Miami's got more number 1 draft choices and more total draft choices and a better winning percentage. Pitt has more national championships, but again, they've won their last one in 1976. Eric is letting us know that the 1989 season was the greatest in Virginia history with a record of 10-3 overall. That is the very utmost ceiling. The winning of the program's first ACC co-championship. That Virginia team, was that the Virginia team that beat Illinois in the Citrus Bowl 30-0? Miami's not been playing football for that long. Yeah, relatively speaking. I think that would have been somewhere in the 1920s for Miami, like 1925, 26, I think is when they started playing. J-Dub, thank you for that. Winning percentage, Miami 629, Pitt 575. What would have been fun for me is to have you guys ask me all those things and see how close I would have come to those numbers. Brian is asking, does Virginia Tech make more sense for the SEC than Virginia? Virginia Tech versus Virginia. The Virginia Tech football is better. Now, right this second, they're both pretty average. They're just marginal. What are they each going to do this year? Probably go 6-6 range, 7-5. So right now, they're about the same. But Virginia Tech, of course, is a better football commodity. The place is packed every week. They love their football. I don't know the geography in Virginia that well. But I believe that Virginia Tech is even more buried in the woods than Virginia, the University of. So in terms of TV markets, you got the DMV, which I can't imagine that has that much bearing on all this. The Washington, D.C. market, they're probably, 100, 150 miles away from either school. But you've got Roanoke, Lynchburg, Richmond. I'm missing somebody else. Roanoke, Lynchburg, Richmond. There's somebody else. There's another market in there. Newport News. So I don't know which one's closer to which one. But Virginia's a better, I don't want to state this for sure. I was going to say a better school. I don't know that for sure, or that it's significant. Ed, we're not talking about, I'm not going to North Carolina. I considered Raleigh, Durham, Greensboro, and Charlotte to be the North Carolina, but I'd have to look at a map. Pina 3844 wants me to read his comment. That you dominate Pitt, it's not even close. Yeah, in the last 40 years, it's not close. Pitt has been a perennial 7-5 team since Jackie Sherrill and Dan Marino left in the mid 80s. Since then, what you're going to see with Pitt, regular seasons since the late 80s, 7-5, 7-5, 7-5, 8-4, 6-6, 7-5. And of course, they were playing 11 games for a lot of those years. Miami, of course, was arguably the best program in college football from the early 80s to the early 2000s. Arguably. Nebraska is in the running, Florida State. Dan Marino, the greatest quarterback of all time. It's arguable, but he's one of the best. Yes, Papa B. I was there when Mississippi State won the SEC West. I covered them exclusively that year with Ole Miss and Alabama. They had a 4-point lead over number one Tennessee at the SEC championship game in the fourth quarter with about 6 minutes left. The Rock Irish is letting us know that an Irish podcast recently placed a survey out there on whether Notre Dame should join the Big Ten. Out of 700 respondents, Notre Dame fans or not, 58% said that Notre Dame should join the Big Ten. I would think that outside of Notre Dame fans, that a great majority of college football fans would tell you that they want Notre Dame to join a conference, and most of them would then say the Big Ten would be their conference of choice. That's what I would guess. But out of Notre Dame fans, I would think that that's a mixed response, and I would think even most Notre Dame fans, similar to our guy Will, who joins us on a regular basis here, calls in all the time, most Notre Dame fans would lean heavily toward they like their independence. There are some disadvantages to joining a league. You've got to go along with the league. And there are votes. There are issues that come up, and you've got to go along with everybody else. You've got to split everything. If you get outvoted, you get outvoted. Anthony says, Mark, there are rumors going around that if the partnership merger with the ACC and the Pac-12 happens, they will probably cannibalize the rest of the Big 12. Is this true or BS? Well, Anthony, none of us know if any of this stuff is true or BS. See, that's the thing. In analyzing this, you can only go with what makes sense. You know, if somebody had a rumor that Boise State's going to join the SEC, well, we'd say, does that make any sense? No, it doesn't make sense because of A, B, and C. So those things can be eliminated. But that, the ACC has 14 teams. The Pac-12 has 10. That's 24 teams right there. And they're going to cannibalize the rest of the Big 12. So is the ACC and the Pac-12, are they going to pare down to their strongest members? I can't see that happening. I don't think they're going to ditch. And in the ACC, it's difficult because who's really weak in the ACC? Because if they're weak in football, Duke, they bring the basketball commodity with them. Maybe Wake Forest is weak, and I hate to offend Wake Forest because, man, I so much admire what they've done as a football program. And academically, they're exceptional. So I'm going to call BS on this, but it's possible. But if the ACC and the Pac-12 get together with 24 schools and then they cannibalize the Big 12 and take who they want, which I guess the best commodities would be, it'd be funny in a certain sense that some of the best commodities and best potential, think about it, in the Big 12 are the most recent members. UCF is a great commodity. Cincinnati, Houston, BYU. More so than Texas Tech, Kansas State, Iowa State. I think he would take the newcomers from the to the Big 12 and then the Oklahoma State and Baylor's. Bruce, this is a point that I've made continually. You're stating here where the SEC gets what they want from the ACC, you think they will stop. The Big Ten and the SEC, I think, are motivated by two things. Obviously, money, but I mean in terms of how this is going to play out. They're motivated by what the other conference does. Had the SEC not taken in Texas and Oklahoma last summer, would USC and UCLA be members? Would they be members of the Big Ten right now? We will never know, but probably not. And now that they are members of the Big Ten, and especially if the Big Ten gets Notre Dame and then somebody else to pair with them, most likely, then the SEC, the likelihood that they're going to grab somebody else then increases because they're matching each other. So that's the one motivation, to match the other conference. The other motivation is, at what point do we reach a place where we survey the field and nobody brings value? Nobody brings enough value to bring on. So that's going to be a stopping point too. If it's an arms race, which it is, and the SEC made the last move, but the Big Ten looks at the field and says, you know what? They're at 24, we're at 20, but there's nobody that adds value. We're good. Or maybe they poach from the Big 12 at that point because none of the other Pac-12 members and ACC members bring value at that point, and they go out there and grab other people. Let me step off here for just a minute. Okay. I'll be back in 1 minute. And we're back. I apologize for that. Thank you so much for giving me a second there. And we have left I should have left the link, and I'll do this going forward. I just got to get into the habit of leaving the link in the description section. So the link is now in the description section. You can grab it there. Jay, I don't want to scare you there. Reasonable Gump, we have posted the StreamYard link several times in the chat, and it's also in the description section. And that cost us about 70 viewers, me stepping off. But again, I have warned everyone early on in the show that I may need to step off for good. We will see. Phil, we addressed the Washington, Oregon to the Big Ten situation. I basically let you know of what makes total sense in terms of the Big Ten not giving them a yes or a no. Makes complete sense to me as to the only reason I can be thinking about why the Big Ten would make that kind of decision. Falcon Rex, Miami, Notre Dame to the Big Ten could work. Ooh, hey, 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 hey. Whoa. I've thought about Notre Dame, Stanford. I've thought about Notre Dame. And then they choose between Washington and Oregon, maybe. Notre Dame, Miami. Whoo. Interesting. Interesting, Falconer X. Wouldn't that be something? Joe says if the ACC gets raided, would the remaining teams attempt to recruit several other football teams and align with the Big East? When we say the Big East, this happened the other day. You mean the American Conference, right? To form a super conference in basketball also. Well, number one, I've not covered basketball for years. I don't know, and I have no opinion on it. And the American Conference just lost its 4 best programs. So who's left in the American Conference of value to the ACC? Maybe Tulane, maybe Navy, maybe SMU. And then the ACC, obviously, geography's out the door. They're just trying to survive at this point. Let's say they lose all the teams we just talked about. And then they got to go to, some combination of SMU, Tulane, Navy, South Florida, which was a really good program up until about 5 years ago. Husker D, thank you for hitting the like. By the way, we've got a Nebraska show that we bring you every Tuesday at 7 Eastern, 6 Central, Nebraska Live. And this was going to be our week to really launch our previews, predictions, all that sort of business. And the USC and UCLA had to go off. Memphis, yes, good call, James Scott. Of course, Memphis to the ACC as well. Yes. Oh, Christopher's talking about a basketball league that, the Big East is obviously was maintained after the football fell apart because of the great basketball schools that were left, Villanova, Georgetown, etc., Providence. And that's what we have. But no opinions here about what would happen on the basketball side with the ACC. We got Reasonable Gump showing up to talk some college football. What's going on, man?
There we go. I finally figured it out. The link in your description is a little bit wrong.
Well, what's wrong about it if you made it here?
Because I had to alter it to get here. The word contribute at the very end, you got to take that off. That leads to a broken link.
That? I don't know why that happened. Well, thanks for figuring that out.
No problem, man.
We'll take care of that.
So these are some pretty crazy times, aren't they?
You bet.
The world of college football as we know it is, well, basically over.
Pretty much. Do you like this? Don't like it? Don't care? You're in the SEC. You're safe.
Well, I was never a fan of Texas and Oklahoma coming in. I liked your initial reaction video, which is basically mine. You're like SEC, just close the doors. Texas and Oklahoma are stupid. They don't need to come in. You don't need them. And let's just put a stop to this. But of course, that was never going to happen. This isn't about football. It's about money, unfortunately. But yeah, I still, I'm going to, I think I'm going to really miss in a few years when when the dust is settled, I'm going to miss the regionality of, of college football. That was one of the cool things about it was, all SEC teams are all, Southern teams made up of, for the most part, 80% or so Southern players. Of course, we go get some West Coast and we get some Northern players here and there, but they are mostly Southern teams. And that was a big kind of, so something to root on, at least down here.
And you have the pride of for your state, for your school, for your region. Right. Yeah.
Now, the SEC is still going to be that. It's still Texas is is still a Southern state, although they'll tell you that they're different. I would say most likely the teams that we're going to raid out of the ACC eventually will probably be on along the lines of Florida State, North Carolina, and Clemson. These are all Southern teams. But as far as I'm not sure how much you can maybe tell me this. Is regionality important to the Big Ten? Is there like a big kind of, we're Northerners, we're Midwesterners, we're better than those stupid Southerners down there? Or did that matter at all?
Oh, I think there was a hint of that. Yeah, not to the degree of the SEC. And maybe I'll make a statement that will rile certain people up. And I'm not stating this as fact. I'm not stating this. I'm just stating this as conjecture, or could this be a possibility? There was obviously something called the Civil War in 1865 is when it ended. The carryover through generations of losing that may have given Southerners a bit of a chip on their shoulder versus Northerners not necessarily having that same kindred spirit based on the result of that conflict.
Well, you probably said something that a lot of people sort of think in the back of their heads. I want to say
that's why I'm here sometimes.
Right. So I'm not sure if you remember, but it probably was around this time last year when we were still talking about the Texas and Oklahoma thing. I came on your show and I said that I saw in about 10 years, if you looked at the country, a map of the United States, I think as far as college football is concerned, you were going to be able to draw a diagonal line from around the top of North Carolina and go southwest and just make sure you encompass Oklahoma and Texas and end it right there. And those are going to be your two conferences in college football. They're basically turning into the NFL, baseball, NBA, basically all pro sports that have two giant divisions, and they play and they meet for the whatever that they call their national championship, World Series, Super Bowl, NBA Finals, all that.
And that would bring us back to a regional aspect of that.
It would.
To a certain extent. It's a little bit broad, the schools in Los Angeles teaming up with schools in Pennsylvania. There's not a lot of commonality there, but at least the fabric of the sport on the southern side of that would be much more intact than on the northern side.
Yeah.
You're the West Coast, you're the Rocky Mountains, you're the Midwest, you're Pennsylvania, you're Boston College, you're just everything that's not South.
Well, honestly, the writing was kind of on the wall. I think we could all kind of see this. I've heard you and some other people venture some guesses that there might be, instead of 2 mega conferences, we might get 4 16-team conferences. I honestly just don't see enough huge brands to go around to support that. Really.
Well, just to clarify just a little bit more precisely what I've said is I've said that I would like the uniformity of 4 16-team conferences, but I don't necessarily, the way this is going, think it's going to land that way, and really never have, because again, it's not, if we had a commissioner and we had a governing body, yes, they would want to keep uniformity to the conferences and say, we have roughly 64 Power Fives right now, 16 per conference, 4 conferences, there we go, versus it's just a grab. It's a land grab. It's a program grab. So it could wind up SEC 24, Big 10 20, Big 12 18, and that's it. Or the ACC 16. Could be all over the place.
Yeah. I saw someone posted about this. I think someone said something to the effect of, once the SEC gets what it wants out of the ACC, they'll stop. And to be honest, I kind of think that might be true. I mean, the SEC obviously would want Florida State, probably Clemson. I'm kind of iffy on whether they'd want Miami or not. But they're really only going to want programs that bring something of value, as you stated, whether that be a money market, whether it be, a large fan base and a powerful program, whether it be a giant recruiting area. the SEC is not interested in Boston College, for example. They're not. I don't think they're going to be interested in teams like Wake Forest. Which is why I think the Big Ten is not immediately also just welcomed with open arms programs like Oregon and Washington. Oregon's good now, and I guess they have the Nike deal. That's probably their ace in the hole right now. But the Big Ten obviously would prefer to get a program like Notre Dame for sure.
Why would the SEC not want Miami?
Because they're a private school and things tend to, I don't know, they probably have to rework a lot of contract things. Their fan base also tends to not be very large, or at least when they're not good, they don't tend to be very large. They can't fill up their own stadium. So it's just stuff like that. I understand the Miami the Miami market is huge and the recruiting area is huge, but Miami is also like the 16th most popular thing in the city. So that's why I didn't say no. I just said I'm a little iffy on it, whether they want them or not. I think they take Florida State first. Is all I'm saying. If it was a choice between the two.
I think there's a whole lot more going on at Miami just because of where they're located than Florida State. But I was surprised to see when I looked at the university rankings, and I don't know if the SEC cares or would take this into consideration, that they're virtually tied. I would have thought Miami was a better university, but they're virtually tied. And yeah, Florida State seems to, being in the Panhandle, be more SEC culture than Miami, for sure.
Right, that's kind of where I was leaning.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got a question for you though. So, when the Big Ten made this announcement with the USC and UCLA, so I heard a lot going on, not heard, and also read a lot going on about how the SEC went out and got two blue bloods, Texas and Oklahoma. So the Big Ten responded with two blue bloods of their own, and that kind of made me hesitate a little bit. I'm like, okay, USC, absolutely, but you're a history guy, Mark. I am too, but my weakness is Pac-12 history. Has UCLA ever been great at football?
Oh, they have been in spurts, but are they a blue blood? Absolutely not.
Okay, that's what yeah.
They're not a blue blood. But
No.
were there stretches of time where UCLA was really good, like top 10 good consistently? Yeah. Late 70s, early 80s. Yeah. Troy Aikman's couple of years. Yeah. And they weren't great. They weren't seriously competing for national championships those seasons. And the last time they did that was in 1998. It's been 24 years since UCLA competed for a national championship, meaning they were in the national championship race the last weekend of the season.
All right. Oh, yeah. So I just wanted to clear that up.
UCLA's record in the last close to 20 years looks like Miami. It's like 58%.
But anyway, yeah, Mark, I think I'm not even sure if it'll take 10 years now, but if anywhere between 5 and 10 years, that's what we're going to have. We're going to have a smaller section of the country, the SEC, but it'll have, again, and I use this phrase not literally, all the talent. The Big Ten will be everywhere else if they still call it the Big Ten, and it'll have all the money. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it right now. So,
well, I got to say that I'm happy to see the Big Ten's got some fight, and they went and grabbed some programs. Not that I agree with it holistically. I would like college football to be back to what it was, but if it's going to go this direction, then I instead of the SEC being so far out in front, that the Big Ten countered. And if the Big Ten gets Notre Dame, then it's really on.
Yeah. And if Notre Dame knows what's good for them, they will take whatever deal the Big Ten is offering, because right now, as you've stated, Notre Dame still has value. They still have leverage in this. They can still probably negotiate and get some things that they want. In a few years' time, if they continue to allow college football to pass them by, I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. I mean, this NBC deal where they get half of their games on a program that nobody thinks of when they think college football, I mean, that is just that was outdated, 15 years ago. Once the SEC and the Big Ten get their TV contracts with ESPN and whatever bidding war, whoever comes out on top for the Big Ten, the new Big Ten deal, I mean, it's just going to make Notre Dame look like, peanuts. The kind of TV money they're bringing in.
You gave me an idea for a video. Okay. All right, Reasonable Gump. Anything else?
No, man. I'm sure other people got something they want to say.
Well, good to hear from you.
Hear from you too.
Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
All right, let's step it in with DeAndre right here. BGTO Football Funk right here on YouTube. How's it going, man?
What's up, Mark? I'm doing good. But I don't know what happened yesterday, but what I was trying to get across is in North Carolina, I know football's king and that football's everything, but North Carolina, Duke, and NC State, Wake Forest, they still care about basketball and more than football. Football makes the most money. We all know that. But I think I was telling you this yesterday. That's why I don't think you're going to see the ACC break up, because it still cares about basketball a lot. I know Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. Go ahead, Mark.
So I've got a question there. I'm not arguing with you because you know more about it than I do. And obviously we all grew up that we're paying any attention to sports knowing ACC basketball. First thing we thought of. Mm-hmm. But so I know that we all think that, and I believe it to be true in a sense. Still, more people in the ACC tune in to watch football games than basketball games. They just do. Now, it's not nearly like it is in the Big Ten or the SEC. And then the other thing I'll mention is you get a number of programs where, when you're talking ACC basketball, when I think ACC, obviously I'm thinking Duke, North Carolina, first and foremost. Then I'm thinking, what used to be Maryland when they were big in basketball in the ACC, and of course Wake and Georgia Tech and those schools. But a lot of those schools are new to the ACC and not great basketball program. Florida State, Miami, Boston College, especially the first two I mentioned, because they're big football programs.
Right. But also the thing that you got to take about State is State started the ACC tournament. I mean, North Carolina State.
Yeah.
They started the ACC tournament. And that's big for them. I think it's going to be hard for them to break apart. I mean, I'm just saying because of basketball. And I agree with you. Clemson, Florida State, Miami probably should put Virginia Tech in there. They probably care a little bit more about football than they do basketball. And they don't have a basketball tradition. But those other four in this area, I just can't see. I mean, what they're going to do about Carolina and Duke?
But the whole conference isn't going to make decisions
right
for everybody.
Right.
If Florida State gets a sweet deal, see ya. If Miami gets a sweet deal, see ya.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the last caller, I agree with something that he said about Miami. And I'm not picking on Miami. But it doesn't seem like Miami a couple years ago when they were talking about what they did to grant rights when Florida State and Clemson was about to leave before, that wasn't a school that you heard about them talking about leaving. I don't know because they play in a pro stadium or whatever. I don't know why Miami's not talked about, and not because they're a bad school, but I'm just saying you just don't hear them talked about leaving to the recent deal, to this current deal coming up.
They're a really good school with a huge TV market, with tons of recruiting, tons of football players in the area, and a great football tradition years ago. Now, the negatives are nobody goes to the games. And I understand Miami fans would say it's hard to get to the games. And if we win, they'll come. But how many people were at Clemson's games during their worst seasons? During Dabo's first year, 6 and 7. Were they still
probably 80,000 people in there? That's a college town.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So there can be excuses made about Miami's attendance, but the SEC, I don't necessarily, to Reasonable Gump's point. I don't know that the SEC wants too many Vanderbilts around. And I know Miami fans would go crazy with the comparison of Vanderbilt, but I'm making a comparison based on what the stadium's going to look like if it's not Alabama or Georgia coming to town, if it's Mississippi State. Well, Mississippi State and those teams are used to playing in front of packed houses. The LSU Mississippi State game, packed. Arkansas Mississippi State, usually, unless they're just awful, packed. But Mississippi State going to Miami, playing in front of 24,000 people. I don't know if the SEC is going to go for that or not, or they're going to care.
Well, and also we need to clarify this. It's really not about the Big Ten and the SEC. Let's just be honest. It's about Fox and it's about ESPN. We always sit around and say, well, it's the Big Ten and the SEC. No, it's about who's going to have power between the television networks. And that's why the ACC might fall apart, because their television contract is terrible. But if I was Clemson, and I'm not trying to be funny, I know everybody like competitive, why would I want to go play in the SEC, and it's a lot harder in the SEC compared to playing the ACC? I wouldn't understand that. I mean, I know everybody said, well, it's harder in the SEC. You're going to get more money. But if I was Clemson, why not take the basketball conference on just like they did in the 80s and 70s? Okay. Hey, I got a quick question for you. So Charles Pell, he was the coach at Clemson, right, in the 70s. Did he go to Florida after that? The one right
Charlie
before
Pell. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I thought
he had a good run at Florida.
So he got caught at Florida just like he got caught cheating at Clemson.
Yeah.
I was wondering. I was like, I was watching Florida versus Miami, maybe 84. I think Jimmy Johnson's first year, like that, right after Auburn. I said that might have been the same coach that was at Clemson when Clemson first started getting in trouble. I mean, he did what he had to do with Ames.
He got fired, and Danny Ford took over.
Right.
At the end of 78.
Right.
Danny Ford's first game was against Ohio State in the Gator Bowl, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they both were cheating. I mean, I just found that very curious because 84, I know a lot of people make the argument Florida should have been the national champion and not BYU. So
every time I talk to you, DeAndre, it makes me want to go back and think, as soon as I get done with this, I'm going to start watching the Clemson Illinois bowl game. When did they play? In the 89 Hall of Fame bowl or something? I want to
30-0.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to bring up another point about this reconstruction. I know LA has a lot of talent. We done talked about this before. The talent's down south. And I know you say that Miami's a pro town and all this other stuff, but the talent still is down south. And I know the bigger cities are the bigger television markets north. How long will this money grab be able to last? You know what I'm saying? Because you got to think, I heard what the guy said, Tony, about how USC going to Rutgers to play is really good for USC. But that's a lot of gas, a lot of travel, moving people and bands and stuff. How long these places being so far apart is going to last, and most of the talent's down south? I know I say he's recruiting at a great level right now, but I mean, I'm just asking.
Well, I got to think, DeAndre, without really thinking this through, is that this has been a challenge for Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, all those teams for decades now, and it becomes harder and harder. I would think that and the SEC has been the dominant conference. I would think that with USC and UCLA and the Big Ten showing that they're going to have this super conference, just like with the SEC, I would think that it would make it a little easier.
So let me ask you this. Let's take away the conferences. Let's look at regions.
Yep. And
since 1970, how many national champions you say were down south compared to up north? Well, let's go to 1980. How many champions would you say were down south compared?
Well, we got 2 Ohio
State.
States, and we got 1 Michigan, and we got 1 Notre Dame, and we got quite a few from Nebraska. What, 94, 90, I get the years, 94, 95, 97. That's, what am I up to? 8. And then what are we counting USC?
We the North.
They're in the North? Okay.
No, would you
USC?
consider Nebraska the
I
Yeah, no, I'm
consider
talking about-
Nebraska in the North. What are we doing with
consider that more
USC? You're
That's
cutting out on
West.
me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
that'd be
so you're
West.
breaking it down north, south, east, west.
Right. And what I'm saying is that most of the most dominant teams have been South, and we left out Penn
Oh, sure.
State off. Yeah. That's what
Sure.
I'm saying.
Penn
Like-
State with 2 national championships. Actually, the North has done not too bad since 1980.
Yeah.
Come up with quite a few there.
So that's what, that 40 years. So you got 8,
I thought I was up to 12.
12. Are you putting Nebraska there?
Where else are you going to put Nebraska? Where are they supposed to be? They're as far north as Ohio
Midwest.
is. They're probably, yeah.
I'll put them Midwest. That's
They're in the west.
Nebraska's more Midwest.
Yeah, they're in the Midwest. Sure.
Oklahoma. Oh, to me, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas spend most of their time in the Midwest. I mean, I know they moved out east or south
Sure.
or whatever you want to call it, but in most of their towns, and our lifetime has been in the Midwest. But I'm just saying,
Yeah,
if you go look at Ohio State, and the trending is going down south.
Oh, sure.
Right. So, and don't get me wrong, I know Ohio State, they're recruiting out their mind. I mean, they're receiver you. But it is what it is. So, but that's what I wanted to ask you about yesterday. And like I said, I think people need to look at North Carolina's defensive line next year and their secondary. That team, those teams are going to be pretty awesome on that side of the ball, on the defense side, I think. I mean, I know they got a lot, but they're recruiting for the last years on the defensive line and secondary.
Okay,
So
DeAndre,
I really think everybody needs.
you're really breaking up. So we're going to let you know. We'll let you go.
Okay.
Thanks,
All right.
DeAndre. We appreciate it.
All
right. Cole Varks is showing up here to talk some college football with us. How's it going? Hello? Oh,
Hello.
we don't want 2 on here. There we go. Cole
Hi.
Varks. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. What's going on?
Again, crazy time in college football, but I got a couple more points I wanted to mention. So someone mentioned earlier about like whether I think you mentioned how Miami and FSU are very similar school-wise.
That's with no analysis of the various components of it. That's just a academic ranking.
Yeah.
That's all I went by.
But overall, they are similar schools. And so I think the SEC really could have a choice between the two. And the reason why I don't think they would add both is because 3 Florida schools would be at a disadvantage, all of them, for recruiting, in my opinion. Because I know Florida has a lot of talent, but so do other southern states. And when you have 3 states in there going for, like, I don't know where their pipelines are and where each of them get most of their players. But for in-state players, all 3 of them trying to go after players with the SEC name, I think could put all of them at a disadvantage when compared with Georgia, for example, that only has itself with that SEC name to compete with. That's just one reason why I think the SEC may not want both of those schools.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a factor or not. So you're talking about a player from Florida?
Yeah, so if you have like a player from Georgia, if they want to go to the SEC in their own state, they have one option. That's Georgia.
Sure.
But if you're in Florida and they had both FSU and Miami, you're going to have 3 different schools going after an in-state guy. Just to me, I don't know much about recruiting, but that to me seems like a reason
Yeah.
why.
I understand your line of thinking. It's logical, but if you look at the schools that are in competition for players in, let's say, Florida and Georgia, and we'll focus on Florida since that's where you're going. That Alabama's in on the best players. Ohio State's in on a lot of the best players. Texas A&M's in on the best players. LSU's in Florida for the best players. Clemson's down there.
I just think they, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there something between like Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida at one point not to add other schools from the same state due to recruiting?
I don't know.
I thought that was a thing at one point. So I just thought that like Florida, a team like Florida would not want to have 2 teams in their state in there.
Yeah. Well, those ironically are the 4 teams in the SEC that have an annual rivalry with a team in state from the ACC.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's why they wouldn't want that. But yeah, I just think it's interesting with recruiting. And if I'm the SEC and if I only want one Florida school, I'd probably go with FSU because of 1, the attendance thing you were talking about, and 2, FSU is, you know, they play Florida every year already. That's a big rivalry. So I think I'd give FSU the slight leg up on Miami, but it's really close, I think.
I don't think that the SEC would be worried about a shortage of players. Because if you would track, and this would be an interesting thing to go through, somebody can do it. I wouldn't want the tedious aspect of it, but to look at what players signed with SEC schools and who were that particular player's 2nd, 3rd, and 4th choices. And I'm guessing that if you went through every player in the state of Florida that signed with an SEC school, that their 80% of their 2nd and 3rd choices were SEC schools.
Yeah. And I just, like I said, I don't know that much about recruiting. I just think it's, you know, another aspect that could be looked at. But another thing I wanted to mention was about college basketball. I don't think, like, people are saying that is, like, men's basketball is probably the 2nd biggest collegiate sport. Like, I mean, a lot of people watch the NCAA tournament. That's a fact. But I don't think when it comes to the regular season, like the UNC isn't going to get, like you said, they're going to get more football viewers than basketball. And so even though the NCAA tournament is big and a lot of people watch, gaining a school like UNC, the regular season isn't viewed as much, and there's so many basketball teams, you're not going to have control over the sport with an addition like them. That's why I don't think it's going to really drive anything at all in terms of realignment. But that's just my opinion.
Okay. Got anything else for us?
No, I just thought I'd come on and give a couple
Absolutely.
thoughts.
Appreciate
right.
you being here.
All right, thank you.
Call back anytime. We'll see you. All right, let's move it along to Jeremy. Joins us here at the Voice of College Football. Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
So I think the money for college football is what's going to drive everything. We already see Fox and ESPN, they control the Big Ten and the ESPN and SEC. I think the media rights for the ACC will be waived by ESPN because they benefit for a lot of reasons to dissolve the ACC, but give the SEC the primary position on picking up the ACC teams that ESPN wants in that division. So if the SEC gets the pick from the ACC, I think you could get a lot of good rivalries starting up. And I think that works itself with a 2-conference, 4 divisions each, and do the local regional areas. Because that's one thing that people are angry about is the loss of regions. So a Big Ten could end up picking up the Pac-12 teams that they choose and allow them to play each other. So you don't have to have them fly all the way across the country for half the games. And that's not really that bad if you think about it through an NFL, through a college football season. One of the games will be a rivalry game, so they could play that on the West Coast. And if you take away all the money from the Big 12, from ESPN, and the Pac-12, that gives them plenty of money to pay each of these teams, say a 24-team league on each side, will have $100 million easily each. So they could also throw a bone out for the rest of the teams and expand the playoffs, go to 12. You get each division champion in there, 2 wild cards for each, and then 2 wild cards for the rest of the teams left. So it doesn't kill college football. You'll give every team a fighting chance for the playoffs.
Okay, let's go back to square one. You've got the SEC swallowing up the ACC, and you're talking about the best teams in the ACC.
Yeah,
So
they get the two. They get the choice. They get Clemson, and then anyone left over that the SEC deems not worthy, the Big Ten can grab.
And they're getting this choice based on what ESPN's telling SEC. They're looking at the SEC and saying, okay, we're partnering with you, and we know that some of the ACC is going to be valuable for you, and we'll add them to the SEC, and we're going to shut down our ACC network and prioritize you.
Because they're taking over ESPN. They're taking over the SEC anyhow. So they will own the rights to the SEC. So essentially, they will still own the rights to the most money in the ACC, and then they don't have to pay Wake Forest, Georgia Tech. They can just funnel that ACC money that they pay into the SEC. So that money doesn't change hands. It just goes to a different conference.
Well, sure. The ESPN's got the complete rights to the ACC as well.
So that would be easy for them to shake hands and be like, okay, those teams now are still, but just under the SEC tie.
Well, what I can't answer is if Wake Forest, NC State, whatever your collection of ACC teams are eliminated from the ACC, whether that diminishes the value significantly or decidedly, and how much of that is changed through the distribution to those various teams.
Yeah, and I think that would be interesting. And so you would have all these other Sun Belts out there, the Mountain West. Right now, those media rights are already owned by CBS, which is a great fit for them. CBS could pick up the rest, and it gives them an extra time to put more on. The leftovers from the Big 12 that don't get swallowed up, they're going to need a new media partner, and CBS could be the one being for them. So I think it would help all of college football more than what we have now, where still the same media companies are fighting and dividing up the total pot into smaller ones, because it'll never be equal. I think you'll always have, even if Pac-12 stays around, I can't see each of those teams getting 20 million. So whoever stays there, Arizona will still complain, hey, they don't feel that it's still fair, and we'll still have these arguments. At some point, this system's going to have to go away because there's too much mismanaged between ESPN has more money, the Fox owns all the Big Ten, and I just don't see of a way that teams are going to be okay with the valuation that they're given.
Well, Fox doesn't own the entire Big Ten. Somebody would have to give us numbers on, I don't know that those can be found, between ESPN and Fox, because ESPN shows a ton of Big Ten games. So there is a distribution there. I don't know what the ratio is between Fox and ESPN.
Oh, so I was talking more from what this new contract is, because I think they're going to take over sole ownership of the Big Ten games. And it makes sense because ESPN, they won't have to split their cost anymore. If they're only worrying about one and they only have to pay one instead of trying to figure out rights for the ACC, they split with Fox and ESPN for the Big 12 right now, and the Pac-12 is split between ESPN and I think CBS. So if ESPN could get out of the business of all these other and then whittle everything down into one, I think it helps them out far more.
Yeah, I can't really answer that. What I can answer is that it doesn't help ESPN to lose the Big Ten. Now, they may lose the Big Ten because it's too exorbitant and because the Big Ten is taking a stand to align with just one media company, and knows how that's going to benefit them in the long run, taking their business away from ESPN and the SEC. But that doesn't help either one of them out initially on the surface in terms of the value of the games, and ESPN losing games like Ohio State and Penn State and a zillion others that bring value. Or they wouldn't have signed the Big Ten all these contracts year after year after year after year.
Yep. I never thought of it that way. That's all I have. I'll let other people.
No, it's good stuff. It's an interesting thought, Jeremy.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll have to go through the TV ratings from last year at some point. I've dabbled in them recently just to build some of these videos and back up and confirm some thoughts that I've had. The Big Ten, the SEC gets watched more from top to bottom. The Big Ten's top 4 or 5 get watched a lot. Almost every week. Well, I'll correct that. Every week, the highest rated game is in the SEC or the Big Ten. And usually the second and the third and the fourth, maybe the fifth, unless Clemson's playing maybe NC State. There aren't a whole lot of attractive games in the ACC with Florida State and Miami down. All right, we got the real MVP on the line. How's it going, man?
It's going. How about you, Mark?
I'm doing well. What's going on?
Well, I would like to ask you something that I think the last caller was strongly hinting at. Do you believe there's a cabal of ESPN, Fox Sports, that is controlling the college football world?
I'm more apt to believe that today than I would have been at any other time. I'm not against nor pro conspiracy. I think they certainly happens in politics and in life. Some people are.
I get that, but it's. I don't see who the winner is. So ESPN is going to get rid of the ACC, which they own, to give it to the SEC network, which ESPN owns.
Yeah, the ESPN poured a ton of money, and I don't know what that figure is. Maybe I did at one point, whatever it was, and it wasn't like they built this network 25 years ago and it's faltering and not doing well. This network's only been on the air like 3 years, and they're still in the process of growing it, and they've poured a lot of money into satellite trucks and personnel and going to every ACC. Now, this is something I don't want to say I was involved. I don't want to misrepresent myself. I wasn't involved in it, but certainly privy to the information and in those conversations that, ESPN has done this. They did it with the SEC and they went to every athletic site in the ACC. And I'm talking about soccer fields and everything, and connected all of them fiber optically, put zillions of dollars into outfitting the ACC from a digital standpoint to be able to broadcast games from the Wake Forest soccer field, from wherever. So it's a lot of time and resources and money that have been put into that network.
Okay, and how come we haven't heard anything out of Washington, Oregon? If I was those schools, I would feel like you're waiting on Notre Dame. Screw you, I'm going to the Big 12.
Yeah. Well, you don't want to let your pride get in the way, though. I understand what you're saying, and I would have the same inclination that, if we're not good enough for you, we've offered, we've applied, you should be able to review our qualifications, and it should be a quick decision. You shouldn't just leave us hanging. But, liken it to, you hear about an actor who gets a huge role and maybe he was the fourth choice, but he still takes that role because it's a huge movie and I can prove myself and show that I should have been the selection. So when there's a difference between making $30 million a year in the Big 12 and making $100 million a year in the Big 10, I understand the pride thing would be there to say, you know what, screw you. We should be good enough for you to accept without having to get the condition of Notre Dame out of the way. But you got it. Cooler heads need to prevail in business.
I get that. So how come with the 4 ACC expansion teams, I'm hearing a lot of Virginia being mentioned into it, but I'm not hearing Virginia Tech, which is weird. Is there a reason Virginia over Virginia Tech?
I tried to make sense of this the other day myself. Somebody asked this, or I thought of it, and this is what I can come up with. I don't think from a television standpoint, media markets, I don't think there's much. They're both located in the state of Virginia, and neither one of them's connected to some media base. It's not like it's Miami and some school in the middle of the swamp in Florida that's not close to a media market. They're both kind of just out in the middle of the woods, and I know I'm going to get some pushback on that. Charlottesville is probably more so in the city than Blacksburg, Virginia, but still they're not connected to media markets, and basically Virginia covers Virginia, Richmond, all the various Roanoke. So I don't think that's a determining factor. I don't think that the football, if anything, Virginia Tech has shown more capable of building football teams that are really good. Virginia has not. Academically, did I come across Virginia Tech? I didn't really look them up to see. I know Virginia is a really good school that has a ton of money. Their endowment numbers are top 5 in the nation in endowment money. They've got $11 billion. But in terms of and how many people watch the games on TV, I would think that would lean Virginia Tech's way. But you're right.
Attendance could go Virginia Tech's way as well.
And there's some kind of thought out there. I don't know how true it is that Virginia is tied to North Carolina. They're rivals, and they would like to stay together. I never really determined that to be some great rivalry myself. If anything, Virginia and Virginia Tech in football is the bigger rivalry.
Okay, so we've got a lot of lame duck teams out there. Which of the lame duck teams do you think is going to have like it's going to feel weird, like if a lame duck team wins the conference championship. Which team is most likely to win the conference championship, and how do you think the conference would react if they won a lame duck team won a championship?
Well, this is another thing I've brought up from time to time because I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating that Oklahoma and Texas may play in the Big 12 for 2 or 3 more years. And if they play 3 more years in the Big 12, let's say, and they play in the championship game every year, that obviously looks horrible for the Big 12. The 2 teams that have owned this conference for 3 consecutive years, and Oklahoma way before that, are gone. Versus the look that the Big 12 can say, you know what? You decided to leave. You played here for, including last season, 4 more seasons, and you couldn't get to the conference championship game. You know, it kept being Oklahoma State and Baylor and whomever else made it. And you know what? See ya, off to the SEC. I think that's fascinating to see who has egg on their face versus who can pound their chest. And same thing in the Pac-12. If it's not going to save the Pac-12, it's not going to save them financially or anything. USC and UCLA are still in a much better place, but at least they can have some pride and save some face if other schools are going to the conference championship game above the teams that are leaving. And likewise, once Oklahoma and Texas join the SEC, I know that SEC fans, and it's human nature, are going to want to see them beaten down for a while. Just, you know, you got to earn your stripes in the SEC. And the worst thing in the world for SEC fans would be for Oklahoma or Texas to win the SEC their first year in the league.
Well, I very, very much doubt that's going to happen. I would almost put that at a 0%er.
0%?
Almost 0.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that Alabama still exists, right? And Georgia still exists?
They're still around.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So it's almost 0%.
It's I got you.
And something I haven't heard anybody talk about is, what is USC's schedule even going to look like in 2024? How is it possibly going to make sense? Do you have it play, like, go on the road to do back-to-back road games, then go home for, like, back-to-back home games? Or do they have to travel all the way from USC to, like, Michigan State, then back home? How would you do a schedule assuming they don't add any teams? Because from what I've seen, people have done schedules with them adding teams.
I would think for the back-to-back road games that a USC or UCLA would have out east, that they would stay out there.
Okay.
I don't think that they would fly back late on a Saturday night, get back to Los Angeles Sunday morning, and let's say they played Rutgers on the road and they're playing Maryland on the road the next week, that then they'd have to pack up 4 days later and go back out there. I don't know how they're going to approach that. I don't know if they would approach that as we're going to spread that out or we're going to clump that together.
Right, that's what I'm trying to ask.
You'd have to talk to a logistics expert. I'd have to really sit down and think about how that would work and which would be the better option. I'm going to take a guess that USC and UCLA are going to have to play in November in cold weather. That's all there is to it. They're going to have to. It's not a situation where enough teams join the league that they have other teams to play. They don't have anybody else to play besides themselves. That'll be one of their games in November against each other. But besides that, they have to all go north to play in the cold in November. I'm going to guess, though, that the Big Ten's going to be somewhat kind to them, and somewhat, they can't totally front load or back load a schedule, but somewhat front load the schedule to visit those schools in the Big Ten in September and early October. Slightly.
Okay. Well, we actually do have a football season coming up in like less than 50 days.
Yeah, we'll start talking about that soon.
It feels like everybody's kind of forgotten about that, so it's coming.
All right,
the
man.
off season's almost over.
Yep.
And hit the like and subscribe button, guys.
Thanks, man.
No problem.
Have a good one. our man to real MVP. Let's kick it on to J-Dub. What's going on, man?
Mark, good evening. I second the real MVP. Thumbs up and subscribe, folks. We got 400 some on in here. We need to drag those numbers up. I want to speak of numbers. This talk about ESPN somewhat was his gist that ESPN would kind of ignore the ACC to focus even more intently on the SEC. Is that what he was trying to get at?
Yes, that ESPN, the caller before the real MVP. Yes,
Right.
That the SEC is ESPN's priority. Therefore, they would say we want to take whatever the valuable commodities are from the ACC, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, whomever else, and move them into the SEC, and then the ACC can go off and do whatever they want. We don't want any part of the rest of the ACC.
Okay, so that would the big part of that being they would invest in the SEC by moving these big ACC pieces into the SEC.
Yes.
Yeah, because ESPN just dropped millions building the ACC network. I mean, that's why you're getting the North Carolina State women's soccer.
That was my point.
Some field in suburban Raleigh.
Yeah.
I mean, why does it look like you're watching a Major League Baseball program when you're seeing Ole Miss baseball from Oxford? Because ESPN sank all that money to sync everything up when they put the SEC network together. I mean, they're not just going to abandon these projects.
Yeah,
they're not going to walk away from that kind of investment.
That's what my point was. When ESPN outfitted the ACC in the last couple of years, just like they did 5 years earlier to the SEC, they went to every soccer field, baseball field, softball field in the ACC. They went to the Wake Forest soccer field and put in fiber optic technology to where they could just go in and plug in and shoot a soccer game from Wake Forest.
Yep.
And they did that with every campus in the ACC, just like they did the SEC.
Yeah, I see the trucks come for Fox Sports when they come to Iowa State. And I saw ESPN when they did Penn State, Iowa. And, you know, you've got miles and miles of cable and all sorts of, it's unbelievable for folks that are, if you're media or you're a photographer like I am, or you're somebody that's there before the game, way before the fans get in the stadium, to watch the night before, the day of, all the hardware that goes into broadcasting one of these games, all the logistics. And now a lot of these networks have gone to these stadiums, like you just mentioned, and a lot of that hardware is already now there. So it's like they can just plug in, you know, so then they're not going to walk. That's a lot of money to walk away from. And I think there's one thing that people, maybe this gets overlooked and not discussed. Mickey Mouse owns Disney. Or Disney owns ESPN, and the mouse has ruined a lot of things it's touched, and the mouse has gone way woke, and they've taken ESPN woke, and ESPN is losing 7 to 8 million subscribers. They're hemorrhaging subscribers. They can't keep doing that. So there comes a point where everybody talks about the power these networks have. The networks are still beholden to you. You still have to tune in and watch the game. You still have to spend money on the advertisers that are paying for those broadcasts. In the end, you, college fan, in the long run, still call the shot. ESPN can't do something crazy that would offend half of the ACC, and a lot of those people say, that's it, I'm mad at ESPN, get them off my cable. You know, there's a lot of numbers involved.
The saving grace for not just ESPN but Fox, and just the way the world is working now with digital versus traditional broadcasting and cable, are the rights fees to the games. We have to watch ESPN. We have to watch Fox to watch college football. If they didn't have those rights fees to those games, the value of their studio shows would plummet. They get far more viewers before the game, after the game, at halftime. The studio shows that are in the middle of a Thursday afternoon on ESPN, sure, there's a lot more people watching them than are watching me. I get it. But
Right.
all the little guys like me put together, it's becoming a greater, more increasing viewership than, again, people tuning into ESPN at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday just to watch their studio shows. When those game rights are everything that they've got. That's the last stake that they've got that's holding all of that together and making them money. If they didn't have those game rights, they'd be done.
Well, I know you've got a bunch of people piled up, but can I just kind of go a little off to the side here?
Sure.
And when ESPN does acquire SEC, I would like you to use whatever influence you still have inside the halls of Bristol to say, somehow, please write the check, get the rights, take the SEC football intro theme music from CBS and carry the SEC theme over to ESPN. Please, for the love of college football. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, J-Dub. Appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. When he was saying that, it reminded me one of the last, let's say the last 2 years I was at ESPN. The group that I managed, along with other people, we had the music department come in because the audio operators for SportsCenter and all the studio shows and the games and so forth, all the music that you hear constantly under highlights packages for SportsCenter and all that, we had the music. I thought these editors and these audio operators should get to know what goes on in the music department. They are always making comments to me. Why do we have these cuts of music? I'd like this or A, B, or C, or this is great, or this sucks, or why do we? And so we brought in I contacted somebody in the music department, the head of the music department. I said, why don't you come in and educate all of us on music rights and how all that works? And it was interesting. But J-Dub just touched upon that. He desperately wants that famed SEC music from CBS to stay alive. Now we got Tim on the line. Welcome in, Tim. You are muted. I don't think I did that to you. No, I did not.
No, my bad. How you doing?
I'm good. What's
yeah,
going
I
on?
just came in. Well, I've been on the road past week and all this crazy that's been going on, but I started talking about this in the chat probably in September of last year when Oklahoma and Texas went to SEC. I said this is probably the only natural progression for the way this is going to go. And obviously I was ridiculed talking about USC, but see, I was talking about 4 teams in general. I was talking about USC, UCLA, and I think I said the Pacific Northwest schools, UW and Oregon, and then I add in there ASU and Colorado. Now, actually, I'm wrong on both of those. I see why now because of the finances, the situation. But you know, I've been talking about this for a while. But I remember people even saying, why would the Big Ten want to have USC? You know, and why would they add anybody? You know, it's just why would they want to share their revenue with this ball? And that was going back and forth for ages. But I don't know. I think anybody that watched this go down knew that it was to become Fox versus the SEC. I mean, I think that ESPN has been behind the SEC going way back. A lot of their moves. I don't know how autonomous the SEC is, and I'm not sure how autonomous the Big Ten is really. I mean, it's really all money now, and this is where it's all, you know, money ruined baseball years ago. You know, I mean, I remember growing up the same infield when I was a kid. You'd have to get New Jersey every 2 years. You know what I mean? You had your same infield of Dodgers for like the whole 70s, you know, and into the early 80s.
Yes, man, Tim, you're taking me back with that. Davey Loeb, Steve Garvey, Bill Russell, and Ron Say across the infield. Absolutely.
You know them.
The longest running infield in the history of baseball.
Yeah, you had Yeager behind the plate, I mean, for a long time, then Socha after. Yeah, I mean, it was the same guys, you know, year after year after year. You could just sit back as a kid and enjoy it. Well, I also grew up watching college football in the 80s. And, you know, I think that was, even though SC was not a power, they were all right, but they weren't a power. That's my favorite time in the sport, was being young and growing up, watching, sitting in front of the TV. There weren't 40 games on. You know what I mean? You had a couple games on and you sat back and watched those games. And and it didn't matter who was on. You were just watching. But I just want anybody in that chat, if you're there in September, ridiculing me when I call this is going to happen, because again, it's all about money. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be about money. But speaking of money, if we can get it back to normalcy, I wouldn't mind seeing, again, both the SEC and the Big Ten get to 20 teams, have 2 divisions, and then everyone plays everybody, and then you have a championship game. I mean, that seems about as easy for me as you could possibly get. You have 9 conference games, everyone plays everyone, then the 2 divisions play for the winner, and now you have the SEC and the Big Ten champ, and then the ACC is going to come together. Right.
You know, the reason that's not going to happen, Tim, is because some teams will never see the championship game, right? Rutgers is not going to the Big Ten championship game. And you hear this all the time when the schedules are reworked and when the conferences are reworked, that there is clamoring out there, whether it be from the schools themselves, the fans, whomever, that they want everyone to see everyone in the conference. So if you're Rutgers and you're constantly just playing your division, and there are no crossover games, you're never going to see anybody in the rest of that conference.
True. I mean, I guess if that's how you want to have it, but I'm just saying,
and even if you're Ohio State and USC and you're going to play in the championship game, Ohio State's never going to play whoever that's in the West that sucks. They just won't schedule it like that, where teams will never play.
No, I know. I just like to get it back to how it was when you want a division, or if you want a conference. I mean, get back in the day, the Big Ten and the Pac-12, Pac-10, you played everybody. There's no bitching involved. There was no like weird tiebreakers and all those stuff. Just you won it on the field. You beat everybody, or you didn't beat everybody. It just, who had the best record went on. But no, you're right. I mean, I guess it also takes away from the fun. I would just think of a practical way, but you're right. I mean, I want to be able to see those matchups again. Right away, I've got cousins in Michigan. I'm like, dude, I'm coming out. I'll be in the big house. I'm going to go to East Lansing with the first chance I get, that first game. And I mean, I'm going to go to the very first game. I don't want to smirch anyone, but even a team I would like, if Minnesota was USC's first game in the Big Ten, I'm going to that game. It's going to be nice to travel. And then the real, and to you, I don't know. I think it's going to be a lot of really wealthy donors that are going to want to be in California in November. I mean, I'm going to keep saying that as well. I just do. All the time, people used to say that Notre Dame fans would always say, well, we play in California in November. You guys play in October. I don't think Notre Dame would ever want to play in California in September when it's still nice in Indiana. They're going to want to come out when it's nice and cold and it's like 30 degrees out. Those schools, the alumni who are writing the checks, are going to want to have a nice vacation in California for a weekend. This 4-day weekend Southern California. I mean, I'm sure inevitably there's going to be some teams, but it's not like USC hasn't played teams like Colorado and Utah. I mean, it's not exactly warm in Utah or Colorado in November. And also the way USC's roster is now, it's not like it's made up of a bunch of Southern California kids. I mean, you got kids from Texas, you got kids from all over the country, where it's not like they haven't played in cold weather before. And again, I agree. It's not like, I'm sure it's a hell of a lot colder in Wisconsin and in Minnesota than it is in Texas, but it's not like these kids are going to freeze and die. You know what I mean? It's not like they're not going to stop playing football once it gets cold. There will be a slight advantage, but I'm just hoping for maybe the fact that they're going to be out there. I mean, I agree with you. They're not going to fly back and forth. There's going to be an acclimation period.
The 2 points I'll make to back up what you're saying is, number one, Colorado weather is so inconsistent. Like, I've spent a lot of time in Colorado in the last 12 or 13 years, and it's all over the place. Like, it gets brutally cold, but you can also go there in December and it's 60 degrees. Like, it can be 65 today, and then we can get hit with a major snowstorm, and it's all over the place. And Utah could be brutally cold as well. And then on the flip side, these guys want to be professionals, and they do become professionals. Shoot, Brett Favre is considered one of the great cold weather quarterbacks in history. Where is he from? Southern Mississippi. Like, these guys, they get drafted in the NFL, and just because you played your whole life in South Florida doesn't mean you're not going to get drafted by the Green Bay Packers. And zillions of guys do, and they play fine.
And I'm pretty sure Tom Brady, who's also from California, played in Michigan and up in New England. So I mean, it's not like they're going to melt. I mean, they're not melt. They're gonna freeze and break or something. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be interesting. I think it's gonna be great. And one nice thing I thought, I mean, I don't know, because I've heard you say in the past that it's a huge advantage to to the West Coast teams when they play in the Rose Bowl. But man, you want to preserve the Rose Bowl. Why don't you make the Big Ten championship every other year if you want to make it fair, saying, oh, it's an advantage to the West Coast teams. But I mean, besides UCLA, I mean, USC doesn't play in the Rose Bowl but once a year. But the fact is that'd be a hell of a showcase to have if you had, you preserve that Rose Bowl tie with the Big Ten. If now all of a sudden you have the equivalent, but it's the Big Ten championship game, if you want to make it every other year or whatever. But I mean, playing any college game at Jerry's World, or in Indianapolis, I mean, playing these games in places where they're NFL stadiums, it loses its flavor. And to be able to play your championship game, man, that would be awesome. Again, I kind of also one more thing on the people talk like
I'll just back up that thought that the Big Ten has to play conference championship games at the Rose Bowl, every 3 or 4 years at least. Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, if you could play on grass under the sun, I mean that nothing looks better than that to me, honestly. And then flying. I mean, people are talking about flying. Like I just flew back from DC, and because they were behind schedule, we got here in 4.5 hours. I mean, they were cooking the whole way. We were moving. But what's the difference between a 3-hour flight up to Seattle and a 5-hour flight to New York? I mean, or 6-hour flight to New York? What's really the big difference? These kids are on chartered flights. It's not like they're going through TSA and all that stuff. Do you know what I mean?
That's a great point. That's a great point too, because I think especially those of us who lived in the East most of our life, we look at a map and it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's skewed. It's not correct. It's that there is so much space out west. Like we think of, well, you're on the West Coast, you're on the West Coast. No. What's the distance just between San Francisco and LA? Isn't it like a 4.5-5 hour drive?
A little bit more, about 7 hours.
Yeah,
to
that's
San Francisco.
like 7 hours. Yeah. So you can drive from where I am in Connecticut to Washington D.C. in 5 hours. And like if you talk to people in Connecticut, they think like that's in another world. Washington D.C. like that's a major trip. Well, I remember us hiring somebody, guy that worked under me. He went to New Mexico State, or one of the New Mexico schools. And I just made a comment to him about going to Vegas. Like, did you go to Vegas a lot? And he was like, oh, it's like 13 hours away. And I was like, what? If you look at a map, I thought it was like 3 hours away. It's like, no, it's like 13 hours away. Like you can drive from here where I am near New York City, drive 13 hours. You can basically make it to Chicago, almost halfway across the country. Like people don't realize how much space is out there. And to your point, yes, USC playing at Washington State or playing at Oregon, that's a major trip.
Yeah, and it is, but I mean, even get on a flight for like an hour and a half flight or 2-hour flight to hour and a half flight to Arizona. The worst part about flying is getting to the airport, getting in. The flight time, honestly, really is not the issue. It's the to and from the airport and all that.
Yeah,
and that doesn't change. It's just the kids are sitting on the airport listening to their phones for an extra hour or 2 hours. I don't see that as a big problem. I see weather. I do agree. I mean, like you brought up, like someone else brought up, they're going to be playing the NFL one day, and there's a number of NFL guys, but there is something about a home field advantage. If you're sitting in 70-degree weather, playing and practicing all through camp and everything, then all of a sudden you find yourself and you're, but then again, in Michigan, it's hot and humid, and in the Midwest, it's hot and humid during the summer too. And then it comes winter time. It's not like it's cold all year round, And who knows, with $30 to $40 million extra, maybe USC will build their own cryo football field where it's nice and cold and they practice. I know that in the old days, they would dunk a football in a tub of water. So the guy gets used to throwing the ball wet. Maybe they'll have a situation where these kids are just lining up in the cold and refrigerated rooms and smacking each other around a little bit,
For as much as is made by Big Ten fans about the weather and we want SEC teams to travel here, and I get it. I have often wondered that too. Would love to see Alabama be playing at the Big House in the middle of November or in January, during a playoff game. Yeah, because we've never seen that. The weather's overblown. It's not an NFL season. There are no playoff games in January, in Buffalo. The weather's fine in the Midwest up until the last couple weeks of the season, maybe. And certainly I've watched Ohio State, Michigan play for 45 years, and half of those games have been 58, 60 degrees. They've been fine. if not more than half of them.
Yeah. That's really all I had to say. But I just I was hoping Wednesdays I want to get on I want to actually get on, because the one of the guys that never gets on Discord when we go to little chats on Discord says, I've never talked to Daryl. He's always right before me. I'd love to get a chat with him these times. But Daryl, one of these times, once you join the Discord chat, we got to get you in there, man. So.
Absolutely. Everybody keep in mind, Tim's there and all sorts of people. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but a lot of great people are in Discord. So you go to Discord by going to Patreon. Let me try to find the board here and let everyone know that you go to Patreon. I'll put it on the ticker there because I can't find the other banner. Go to Patreon, search Mark Rogers TV, sign up there. And when you do, I get you a link. And you're all set to join Discord, and you can talk college football anytime.
Yeah. But anyway, I haven't had a chance to talk about it. I'm super stoked to be in the big. I mean, again, writing was on the wall. I kept telling in my message board saying we can't stay in this conference and have other schools making double and triple the money and think that we're going to be viable. So again, I knew it was coming. I knew we were a big enough brand that someone was going to pick us up. And staying with the sinking ship is brave and honorable, but it's also going to be the end of you. You know what I mean? So I'm glad we made the move. I can't wait. All the people out there, I'm going to be sleeping on your couches. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, I'm going to be coming to all of the as many away games as I possibly can, because I'm super stoked to go out there. So thanks, Mark.
Tim, appreciate you being here. All right, everyone. We've got a Miami show that started at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So I'm going to do what the Flash did at one point. If you recall this, the Flash ran around the circumference of the planet so fast, it turned back time. He just went so fast that the clocks went backward because they had to change something from like an hour before. So he went around the globe, turned the clock back, and then he took care of things. So that's what I got to do right now, because it is, oh my goodness, 8:09. We're on the Miami channel like 30 seconds ago here at the Voice of College Football. So thank you so much for being here, and we will see you in 30 seconds on the Miami channel as soon as the Wholesome One shows up, and we will talk Miami football then. And we'll be back here tomorrow night, Friday night. If you don't want to hear about Miami, I forgive you. And you'll be back here on Friday night at 8 o'clock Eastern time, West Virginia Live, followed by another call-in show. See you in about 30 seconds.